Misogynistic teacher refuses to pass girls. Then the principal intervenes in a big way. The classroom was quiet, save for the sound of Mr. Harris's pen scratching across paper. He sat at his desk, a frown etched on his face as he graded the latest batch of assignments. His glasses perched low on his nose, he barely glanced at the students' work before scrawling his signature red marks across the pages. Emma sat in the third row, her heart pounding as she watched him shuffle through the stack. She'd spent hours perfecting her essay on the historical impact of women in politics, researching late into the night. Her writing was precise, her arguments sharp. She knew it was good, better than most of her classmates' work, but a sinking feeling told her it wouldn't matter. Finally, Mr. Harris reached her paper. His eyes scanned the first few lines before he huffed, shaking his head. "Emma," he said, his tone clipped. "Come here." Emma stood hesitantly, clutching the edge of her desk as her classmates whispered around her. She approached his desk, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "This," Mr. Harris said, holding up her paper, "is an example of overthinking. You've used far too many words to say very little. It's disorganized and lacks focus." Emma blinked, her cheeks flushing red. "But I followed the outline you gave us. And I made sure my arguments—" Mr. Harris cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Arguments are only valuable if they make sense, Miss Johnson. Yours are scattered at best." He scribbled a large C- at the top of her paper before tossing it onto the growing pile of graded assignments. "Next time, try to keep it simple." Emma's chest tightened as she returned to her seat, clutching her paper. Her best friend, Sophia, leaned over and whispered, "What did he say?" Emma shook her head, unable to find the words. She glanced at the boys in the class, most of whom were grinning as they received their papers back. A few had managed BS or CS, but others had earned as with essays that were hastily thrown together, their arguments vague and unsupported. "Unbelievable," Sophia muttered under her breath. "He's doing it again." It wasn't the first time Mr. Harris had graded the girls in the class unfairly. Emma and Sophia had compared their work to the boys more than once, finding glaring discrepancies in how Mr. Harris applied his standards. The girls had to be perfect to scrape by with AB, while the boys were praised for mediocre efforts. Emma slumped in her chair, staring at the bright red siege on her paper. She'd worked too hard for this. Something had to change. That afternoon, Emma and Sophia sat on the steps outside the school, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the pavement as they sifted through their graded assignments. "He didn't even read half of this," Sophia said, pointing to the untouched sections of her essay. "How is he allowed to get away with this?" Emma sighed, pulling her knees to her chest. "Because no one's willing to call him out. He's been here forever and people just accept it." "Well, I'm not accepting it," Sophia said firmly. "This isn't fair, Emma. You're one of the smartest people in that class, and he's treating you like you don't matter." Emma hesitated. She wanted to fight back, but a knot of fear tightened in her stomach at the thought of confronting Mr. Harris. What if it just makes things worse? "He could fail me entirely." "He won't," Sophia said, her voice resolute. "Not if we have proof." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Sophia glanced around to make sure no one was listening before leaning closer. "We start documenting everything. Grades, comments, assignments, anything that shows how he treats the girls versus the boys. Once we have enough, we take it to Principal Williams." Emma bit her lip, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Principal Williams was known for being fair and supportive, but what if Mr. Harris convinced him otherwise? What if he doesn't believe us? "Then we make him believe us," Sophia said. "But we can't just sit back and let this keep happening." Emma nodded slowly, a spark of determination igniting in her chest. "But let's do it." The next few weeks were tense. Emma and Sophia kept meticulous records, collecting copies of their graded assignments and comparing them with those of their male classmates. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The girls were consistently held to a higher standard, while the boys received praise for mediocre work. Sophia even managed to record some of Mr. Harris's more blatant comments during class. One afternoon, when a boy stumbled through a presentation, Mr. Harris chuckled and said, "Well, at least you tried. That's what matters." Later, when a girl fumbled during her turn, he rolled his eyes and muttered, "You should have been better prepared." The evidence was damning, but presenting it to Principal Williams was another matter entirely. Emma's nerves frayed as the pile of proof grew. She couldn't shake the fear that Mr. Harris would retaliate if he found out. Finally, Sophia pushed her to act. "We have everything we need," she said one afternoon after school. "It's time." Emma took a deep breath, clutching the folder of evidence. "All right, let's do it." Principal Williams was sitting at his desk when Emma and Sophia walked into his office. He looked up from his paperwork, his brow furrowing in concern. "Emma, Sophia," he said. "What can I do for you?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Sophia for reassurance. Sophia nodded, and Emma stepped forward, placing the folder on his desk. "It's about Mr. Harris," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We think he's being unfair to the girls in his class." Principal Williams's expression shifted to one of surprise, then seriousness. He opened the folder and began sifting through the contents. His frown deepened as he reviewed the evidence, the graded assignments, the recorded comments, the stark disparities. "This is concerning," he said finally, looking up at the girls. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll need to look into this further." "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Principal Williams offered a reassuring smile. "Now, I'll start an investigation. But don't worry, you did the right thing by coming to me. I'll handle this." The following week, Principal Williams sat in on one of Mr. Harris's lessons, his presence creating a palpable tension in the room. Mr. Harris pretended not to notice, but his usual arrogance was replaced by a forced politeness that didn't fool anyone. As the lesson progressed, Principal Williams observed the subtle ways Mr. Harris treated the boys and girls differently, how he dismissed the girls' questions while praising the boys' contributions, even when they were incorrect. By the end of the class, Principal Williams's jaw was set, his decision clear. That afternoon, Mr. Harris was called into a meeting with Principal Williams. The door to the office remained closed, but the murmurs of the faculty speculated about what was being discussed. When Mr. Harris finally emerged, his face was red with anger, but he said nothing as he stormed down the hallway. Meanwhile, Emma and Sophia waited anxiously for news. When Principal Williams finally called them into his office, their hearts raced. "I've spoken with Mr. Harris," Principal Williams said, his tone calm but firm. "And I've reviewed all the evidence you provided. I want you to know that I take this very seriously." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What's going to happen?" "For now, I've instructed Mr. Harris to reevaluate your assignments and provide detailed feedback," Principal Williams said. "But this isn't over. I'm planning to address this issue more broadly." The news that Mr. Harris had been called out by Principal Williams spread like wildfire across the school. Whispers filled the hallways as students speculated about what had happened behind closed doors. Some of the boys in Mr. Harris's class scoffed at the idea that their teacher could be in trouble. "He's just tough on them because they can't handle the work," one of them muttered to his friends during lunch. "It's not his fault they're not as good as us." Emma overheard the comment as she passed by, her stomach twisting with anger. Sophia grabbed her arm before she could say anything. "Don't waste your breath," Sophia said. "They'll find out soon enough." But the tension in the classroom was undeniable. When Mr. Harris returned to teaching after his meeting with Principal Williams, his demeanor had changed, subtly, but noticeably. He avoided his usual biting remarks toward the girls, though his comments were still clipped and condescending. He spent more time than usual explaining concepts to the boys, as if trying to prove that his bias didn't exist. The girls, however, saw through it. Emma and Sophia exchanged wary glances during class, silently agreeing that this wasn't over. That week, Principal Williams called a meeting with the entire teaching staff. As Emma and Sophia walked past the teacher's lounge, they caught snippets of the conversation. "We need to ensure every student is treated fairly," Principal Williams was saying. "There's no room for bias in this school, intentional or not." "But how do we address that without alienating the staff?" one teacher asked. "If Mr. Harris feels targeted, it could create more problems." Principal Williams's voice softened, but it carried a firmness that couldn't be ignored. "This isn't about targeting anyone. It's about holding ourselves accountable and setting an example for our students. Emma felt a flicker of hope as she listened. Principal Williams wasn't just brushing the issue aside, he was addressing it head-on. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris seemed determined to reassert his authority in subtle ways. During a classroom discussion about the midterm projects, he announced that the girls' projects would undergo a peer review by the boys in the class. The implication was clear: the girls' work needed to be scrutinized more closely because it couldn't stand on its own. Emma's hand shot up. "Why aren't the boys' projects being peer-reviewed as well?" she asked, her voice steady but challenging. Mr. Harris smirked, leaning against his desk. "Because the boys' work has already demonstrated a higher standard of quality." The room fell silent. Even some of the boys shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing how blatant his comment had been. "That's not fair," Sophia said, her voice rising. "You're holding us to a different standard, and you know it." "Enough," Mr. Harris snapped, his patience wearing thin. "If you have a problem with the way I run my classroom, you're welcome to take it up with the principal." Emma and Sophia exchanged a glance. That's exactly what they intended to do. After class, they marched straight to Principal Williams's office. Emma's hands trembled as she knocked on the door, but Sophia's steady presence kept her grounded. Principal Williams looked up from his desk as they entered, his expression shifting to one of concern. "What's wrong?" he asked. Emma explained what had happened, her words tumbling out in a rush. She described Mr. Harris's comments, the peer review assignment, and the clear bias he had displayed once again. Principal Williams listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. When Emma finished, he leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. "This is unacceptable," he said finally. "I'll speak with Mr. Harris again." "But will it be enough?" Sophia asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "He's not going to change unless there are real consequences." Principal Williams nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. This isn't just about Mr. Harris, it's about the culture we're building here. I think it's time we take a more public stand." A few days later, an announcement was made that the entire school would gather for an assembly. The students buzzed with curiosity, wondering what it could be about. Emma and Sophia sat together near the front, their anticipation growing as the gym filled with students and staff. Principal Williams took the stage, his presence commanding yet approachable. He began by addressing the importance of fairness and equality in education, speaking about the values the school aimed to uphold. "Recently," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "it's come to my attention that some of our practices and attitudes may not reflect these values as well as they should. As educators, it's our responsibility to ensure that every student has an equal opportunity to succeed." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Principal Williams continued, his tone firm but compassionate. "I want to acknowledge the courage of the students who came forward to address these concerns. It's not easy to stand up and speak out, but it's an essential part of creating a better environment for everyone." Emma felt a surge of pride, though she kept her expression neutral. Sophia gave her a small, encouraging nudge. Principal Williams then shared examples of anonymous feedback and data he had collected, highlighting patterns of bias without naming Mr. Harris directly. He emphasized the need for growth and accountability, both for the staff and the students. To that end, he concluded, "We're implementing new measures to ensure fairness in grading and classroom practices. This includes peer evaluations across all classes, as well as a review of current teaching methods." The students erupted into applause, their support evident. Even some of the boys who had benefited from Mr. Harris's favoritism seemed to recognize the importance of the changes. In the days that followed, Mr. Harris's behavior shifted dramatically. His sharp edges softened, though whether it was due to genuine reflection or fear of further consequences was unclear. He began grading assignments with more consistency, and his comments during class became more measured. Emma and Sophia kept a watchful eye, determined to hold him accountable. But for the first time, they felt like they had allies, not just in Principal Williams, but in their classmates as well. One afternoon, as Emma was packing up her things after class, Mr. Harris approached her desk. She looked up, surprised to see an uncharacteristically thoughtful expression on his face. "Miss Johnson," he said, his tone quieter than usual. "Wanted to apologize." I may have been unfair in my assessments before. Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. Thank you, she said finally, her voice cautious. Mr. Harris hesitated, then nodded. You're a bright student. I'll do better. As he walked away, Emma felt a mix of emotions: relief, validation, and a lingering skepticism. Change wouldn't come overnight, but it was a start. By the end of the semester, the atmosphere in Mr. Harris's classroom had shifted. The girls no longer felt the weight of his bias, and the boys began to see their classmates as equals rather than competitors. The peer evaluations introduced by Principal Williams fostered collaboration and mutual respect, creating a more supportive learning environment. For Emma and Sophia, the journey had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. They had learned the power of standing up for what was right, even in the face of resistance. And in doing so, they had helped pave the way for a better future, not just for themselves, but for everyone who would come after them. The semester wasn't just about proving a point, it became about setting an example. Emma and Sophia's stand against Mr. Harris didn't just change one classroom, it inspired others across the school. As the new policies were put into practice, students began to notice a difference, not only in Mr. Harris's behavior but in the way teachers interacted with all students. Yet, beneath this progress, tension still simmered. Mr. Harris wasn't the kind of man to let go of his pride easily. Though he tried to keep his resentment in check, it occasionally bubbled to the surface. Subtle digs during lessons and curt replies hinted at the inner conflict he was wrestling with. But now, Emma and Sophia were no longer afraid to push back. One morning, during a class debate about leadership qualities, Mr. Harris posed a question: "What do you think makes someone a strong leader?" Several students raised their hands. He pointed to one of the boys, who confidently replied, "A strong leader knows how to take charge and make decisions quickly." "Good," Mr. Harris said. "Anyone else?" Emma raised her hand, and Mr. Harris's eyes flicked to her, reluctant. "Yes, Miss Johnson." Emma took a deep breath. "I think a strong leader knows how to listen to others, even when it's uncomfortable. They don't just rely on their authority, they earn respect by treating everyone equally." The class fell silent, her words hanging in the air. Mr. Harris's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he moved on to the next student, clearly unsettled. Sophia leaned over and whispered, "He's going to have to sit with that one." Emma smiled faintly, a small victory in her pocket. Outside the classroom, the girls' actions were having a ripple effect. Other female students began sharing their own stories of bias and unfair treatment, not just in Mr. Harris's class, but in sports, extracurricular activities, and even interactions with their peers. A sense of solidarity grew among them, a quiet revolution taking root. The school's feminist club, which had previously struggled to attract members, saw a sudden surge in interest. Emma and Sophia were invited to speak at one of the meetings, where they shared their experiences and encouraged others to stand up for themselves. "It's not just about calling out what's wrong," Emma said, her voice steady but passionate. "It's about building something better. We can't just tear down the old ways, we have to replace them with something that works for everyone." The room erupted into applause, and for the first time, Emma felt a sense of true empowerment. She wasn't just a student anymore, she was a leader. Meanwhile, Principal Williams continued to keep a close eye on Mr. Harris. He conducted surprise classroom observations and regularly reviewed assignments to ensure the new policies were being followed. It was clear that Mr. Harris was trying to comply, but there was still an underlying resistance in his demeanor. One day, Principal Williams called Mr. Harris into his office for a private conversation. The teacher sat stiffly in the chair, his arms crossed. "I wanted to check in," Principal Williams began, his tone calm but firm. "How are you adjusting to the new policies?" Mr. Harris shrugged. "They're fine. If anything, they've added more work to my plate." Principal Williams nodded, understanding the resistance but unwilling to indulge it. "Change isn't easy, but it's necessary. I need to know that you're fully committed to these changes, not just on the surface, but in how you approach your students." Mr. Harris's expression hardened. "With all due respect, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I know how to do my job. And I'm not questioning your experience," Principal Williams replied. "But experience doesn't exempt anyone from growth. If we're not willing to evolve, we're failing our students. The word struck a nerve. Mr. Harris sat in silence for a moment, his defenses cracking just slightly. "I'll keep that in mind," he said finally. Principal Williams nodded. "That's all I ask." Despite the progress being made, not everyone was supportive of the changes. Some of the boys in the school, emboldened by their own insecurities, began pushing back against the girls who had spoken out. Rumors spread, and snide comments were whispered in the hallways. One day, as Emma was walking to her locker, she overheard a group of boys mocking her. "Guess we all have to be perfect now," one of them sneered. "Wouldn't want Emma running to the principal again." Emma froze, her heart pounding. She clenched her fists, willing herself not to react. But before she could walk away, Sophia appeared at her side, her expression fierce. "Got something you want to say to her face?" Sophia demanded, stepping forward. The boys exchanged glances, clearly surprised by her boldness. "We're just joking," one of them muttered. "Yeah, well, your joke's not funny," Sophia shot back. "And if you have a problem with fairness, maybe you should take a look in the mirror." The boys fell silent, their bravado deflated. Emma shot Sophia a grateful smile as they walked away. "Thanks," Emma said softly. Sophia shrugged. "They're just scared because things aren't rigged in their favor anymore." The weeks turned into months, and by the end of the semester, the changes Principal Williams had implemented were starting to feel like the new normal. Teachers across the school were more mindful of their biases, and students began to see each other as equals rather than competitors divided by gender. Mr. Harris, though still somewhat gruff, had shown signs of genuine improvement. He started providing more constructive feedback on assignments and made an effort to call on students equally during class discussions. Though he never outright admitted his mistakes, his actions spoke louder than words. On the last day of the semester, Mr. Harris handed back the final projects. When Emma received her paper, her heart raced as she unfolded it. At the top, in neat red ink, was an A. She looked up at Mr. Harris, who gave her a small nod. It wasn't much, but it felt like an acknowledgement, a quiet admission that he had underestimated her. The semester ended with a school-wide celebration, honoring the students' achievements and the progress the school had made. Principal Williams gave a speech, praising the courage and resilience of the students who had spoken out. "As educators, our job isn't just to teach," he said. "It's to learn, to listen, to grow. And it's our students who often remind us of what's possible when we're willing to change." The crowd erupted into applause, and Emma felt a swell of pride. She glanced at Sophia, who grinned and gave her a thumbs up. Later that evening, as Emma packed up her things for the holidays, she reflected on how much had changed, not just in the school, but in herself. She had found her voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it anymore. In the weeks that followed, the effects of the semester's events continued to ripple through the community. Parents wrote letters of support to the school, praising the changes and the students who had made them possible. The Feminist Club expanded its efforts, organizing workshops and discussions to promote equality and empowerment. Emma and Sophia became unofficial mentors for younger students, sharing their story and encouraging others to stand up for what they believed in. Their journey had been difficult, but it had also been deeply rewarding. As the new semester began, Emma walked into Mr. Harris's classroom with a newfound confidence. The room felt different now, lighter, more open. She took her seat in the third row, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Mr. Harris began the lesson, his tone measured and professional. As he called on students to share their thoughts, Emma noticed something remarkable. He was treating everyone equally. For the first time, it felt like they were all on the same playing field. And that, Emma thought, was the real victory. The next semester began with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. For Emma and Sophia, the fight they had undertaken felt like a turning point, but they were acutely aware that progress could be fragile. As they entered Mr. Harris's classroom for the first lesson of the new term, they braced themselves for any lingering tension. To their surprise, however, the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Mr. Harris stood at the front of the class, his posture less rigid than before. He greeted the students with a nod and began the lesson without the usual air of superiority that had once defined him. The girls exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the shift. Throughout the lesson, Mr. Harris's interactions were measured and fair. He called on students evenly, offered constructive feedback, and, perhaps most notably, showed genuine interest in their ideas. When Emma contributed to the discussion, he listened intently and nodded in approval. "That's an insightful point, Emma," he said. "I'd like to hear more about how you reached that conclusion." Emma blinked, momentarily stunned. It was the first time he had ever invited her to elaborate on her thoughts rather than dismissing them outright. She cleared her throat and explained her reasoning, feeling a newfound sense of validation. By the end of the class, the tension that had once plagued the room seemed to have dissipated. The boys no longer looked at the girls with condescension, and the girls no longer hesitated to speak up. It was as if a silent agreement had been reached. Things were going to be different now. Outside the classroom, the changes continued to ripple through the school. Principal Williams, determined to build on the momentum of the previous semester, launched a series of initiatives aimed at fostering equality and inclusion. He organized professional development workshops for the staff, inviting experts to speak about unconscious bias and equitable teaching practices. At the same time, the students took it upon themselves to create a more supportive environment. The Feminist Club partnered with other student organizations to host events and discussions, ranging from panel talks to mentorship programs for younger students. Emma and Sophia became regular speakers at these events, sharing their experiences and encouraging others to take action when they saw injustice. One afternoon, as Emma and Sophia were preparing for a panel discussion, they were approached by a shy first-year student named Lily. She clutched a notebook to her chest and looked up at them with wide, nervous eyes. "Hi," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to say thank you." Emma tilted her head, smiling warmly. "For what?" "For everything you did last semester," Lily said, her cheeks turning pink. "I was so scared to speak up in class before, but now I feel like I can." Sophia grinned. "That's what it's all about, Lily. Standing up for yourself and knowing your voice matters." Lily nodded, her confidence growing. "Do you think I could join the Feminist Club? I want to help." "Of course," Emma said. "We'd love to have you." As Lily walked away, Sophia turned to Emma with a satisfied smile. "We're building an army." Emma laughed. "One voice at a time." Despite the progress being made, there were still challenges to overcome. Not everyone was thrilled about the changes, and a small but vocal group of parents began to voice their discontent at school board meetings. They accused Principal Williams of overstepping and claimed that the new policies were creating an unfair environment for the boys. Emma's own parents, however, stood firmly in her corner. Her mother attended one of the meetings and spoke passionately in defense of the school's efforts. "Our daughters deserve the same opportunities as our sons," she said, her voice unwavering. "Teaching them to stand up for themselves isn't divisive, it's empowering. And if some people feel threatened by that, maybe they should examine why." Her words were met with a mix of applause and grumbles, but it was clear that she had struck a chord. The school board ultimately reaffirmed their support for Principal Williams and his initiatives, solidifying the progress that had been made. Meanwhile, Mr. Harris's transformation continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Though he still had his moments of gruffness, there were glimpses of genuine growth in his interactions with the students. He began incorporating more diverse perspectives into his lessons, assigning readings and projects that celebrated the contributions of women and other historically marginalized groups. One day, he surprised the class by inviting a guest speaker, a former student who had gone on to become a successful engineer. The woman, a confident and accomplished professional, spoke about the challenges she had faced as a woman in a male-dominated field and how she had overcome them. As the class listened intently, Emma couldn't help but notice the way Mr. Harris watched the speaker. There was a flicker of something in his expression. Pride, perhaps, or even a hint of regret. When the speaker finished, he stood and thanked her, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You're an inspiration," he said. "I hope my students can learn from your example." The words lingered in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey he was on. By the end of the year, the school had undergone a remarkable transformation. The new policies, combined with the efforts of students and staff alike, had created an environment where fairness and inclusion were the norm rather than the exception. The feminist club had grown into one of the most active organizations on campus, and students of all genders felt empowered to speak up and support one another. Emma and Sophia, now seniors, were honored at the end-of-year assembly for their leadership and courage. Principal Williams presented them with certificates of recognition, his voice filled with pride as he addressed the crowd. These two young women remind us that change is possible when we have the courage to stand up for what's right, he said. Their actions have not only improved our school but have set an example for all of us to follow. The audience erupted into applause as Emma and Sophia accepted their certificates. Emma's parents beamed from the front row, her mother wiping away a tear. As Emma looked out at the crowd, she felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the recognition, but for the journey that had brought her to this moment. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. On the last day of school, Emma stopped by Mr. Harris's classroom to thank him. Though their relationship had been fraught with tension, she recognized the effort he had made to change. "Mr. Harris," she said, standing in the doorway. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For listening. And for trying." Mr. Harris looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she thought he might brush her off, but then he stood and walked over to her. "You taught me something this year, Emma," he said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "That it's never too late to learn. Or to do better." Emma smiled, her chest swelling with unexpected emotion. "I guess we both learned something." Mr. Harris nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Good luck out there, Miss Johnson. I think you're going to do great things." As Emma and Sophia walked out of the school for the final time, they reflected on how far they had come. They had started the year as students trying to survive a hostile environment, and they were leaving as leaders who had changed it. "This is just the beginning," Sophia said, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "There's a whole world out there that needs fixing." Emma laughed, the sound light and free. "Good thing we're ready for it." And with that, they stepped into the future, knowing they had the power to make a difference. One step, one voice, one act of courage at a time. The end of the school year marked a new beginning not just for Emma and Sophia, but for the entire community. The ripple effects of their fight for fairness were being felt far beyond the classroom. Local newspapers picked up the story, framing it as a tale of resilience and justice. Parents who had once been skeptical of the changes began to see the benefits in their children's confidence and willingness to speak out. Emma and Sophia, however, weren't ones to rest on their laurels. As the summer stretched ahead of them, they began planning how to carry the momentum into their senior year. They knew that change was fragile, and without constant effort, old habits could creep back in. One evening, as they sat on Emma's porch, Sophia laid out her vision. "We need to start something bigger," she said, leaning forward with excitement. "Something that lasts even after we graduate?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like a mentorship program," Sophia said. "We can pair younger students with upperclassmen who've been through this stuff. Teach them how to stand up for themselves, how to spot bias, and how to create change." Emma considered it, her mind racing with possibilities. "That could work. But we'll need support, from teachers, parents, maybe even the school board." "Then we'll get it," Sophia said confidently. "We've already proven we can make a difference. Now it's time to think bigger." As they began putting their plan into action, Emma and Sophia encountered resistance from an unexpected source, Mr. Harris. Though he had made strides in his behavior, his pride remained a stumbling block. When Emma and Sophia approached him about joining the mentorship program as an advisor, he balked. "I don't think I'm the right person for that," he said, his tone curt. "There are plenty of other teachers who would be better suited." Sophia crossed her arms, her frustration evident. "With all due respect, Mr. Harris, you're exactly the person we need. You've been through this journey. You've changed. Who better to guide others through the same process?" Mr. Harris hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." Emma stepped in, her voice softer but no less firm. "It's not about being perfect. It's about showing that growth is possible, that people can learn and do better. You've already done that." For a moment, Mr. Harris seemed to wrestle with his thoughts. Finally, he let out a resigned sigh. "All right, I'll think about it." Meanwhile, Emma and Sophia worked tirelessly to build support for their program. They met with Principal Williams, who immediately saw the potential and offered his full backing. They reached out to other teachers, many of whom were eager to help. Even the feminist club rallied behind the idea, volunteering to serve as peer mentors. The biggest challenge, however, was convincing the school board to fund the program. At the next board meeting, Emma and Sophia presented their case, armed with statistics, testimonials, and a clear vision for the future. "This isn't just about our school," Emma said, her voice steady but impassioned. "It's about creating a model that other schools can follow. If we can show that fairness and inclusion lead to better outcomes for everyone, we can inspire change far beyond this community." The board members listened intently, their expressions a mix of skepticism and intrigue. When Emma finished, there was a moment of silence before one of the members spoke. "You've made a compelling case," she said. "But programs like this require resources, time, money, and personnel. How do you plan to sustain it in the long term?" Emma glanced at Sophia, who stepped forward with confidence. "By proving it works," she said. "We'll track the results: improved grades, better relationships between students and teachers, increased engagement. Once we have the data, we can apply for grants and partnerships to keep it going." The board members exchanged glances, nodding slowly. "All right," the chairwoman said. "We'll approve a pilot program for 1 year. But you'll need to show results if you want it to continue." Emma and Sophia beamed with pride, knowing they had overcome yet another hurdle. The mentorship program launched at the start of the new school year, and the response was overwhelming. Dozens of students signed up, eager to be part of something meaningful. The program paired younger students with older mentors, who guided them through workshops, discussions, and one-on-one support sessions. Mr. Harris, true to his word, joined as an advisor. Though he was initially hesitant, he quickly found that he had something valuable to offer. His own journey became a powerful example for students and teachers alike, showing that even deeply ingrained biases could be unlearned. One day, during a workshop on unconscious bias, a student asked Mr. Harris a pointed question. "How did you realize you were wrong?" Mr. Harris paused, the room falling silent as everyone waited for his answer. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "I spent a long time justifying my behavior, convincing myself that I was doing the right thing. But then, someone showed me the truth. And once I saw it, I couldn't ignore it anymore." Emma and Sophia exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with pride. They had been the ones to show him the truth, and now he was using that knowledge to help others. As the program gained momentum, it began to attract attention from outside the school. Local organizations reached out to offer support, and neighboring schools expressed interest in adopting similar initiatives. Emma and Sophia found themselves speaking at community events and even on a local news program, where they shared their story and the impact of the mentorship program. "It's not about perfection," Emma said during the interview. "It's about progress. We're all capable of growth, and when we work together, we can create something truly transformative." The interviewer smiled. "And what's next for you two?" Emma hesitated, glancing at Sophia. "College, hopefully," she said. "But wherever we go, we want to keep making a difference." This is just the beginning. As the year progressed, the mentorship program began to yield tangible results. Students reported feeling more confident and supported, and incidents of bias and discrimination decreased significantly. Teachers noticed a shift in the school's culture, with students working together more collaboratively and treating each other with greater respect. For Emma and Sophia, the success of the program was deeply rewarding, but it also came with its own challenges. Balancing their responsibilities as leaders with their academic work and college applications was no small feat. There were late nights and moments of doubt, but they leaned on each other for support, knowing they were stronger together. The program's crowning achievement came at the end-of-year showcase, where students shared their experiences and the lessons they had learned. Lily, the shy first-year student who had joined the feminist club, stood on stage and spoke about how the program had changed her life. "I used to think my voice didn't matter," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But Emma and Sophia showed me that it does. They showed all of us that we have the power to make a difference. And now, I want to be that person for someone else." The audience erupted into applause, and Emma felt tears prick her eyes. This was what it was all about: passing the torch, empowering the next generation to carry the work forward. As graduation approached, Emma and Sophia reflected on everything they had accomplished. The school had changed in ways they never thought possible, and they had grown into leaders who were ready to take on the world. On their last day of school, they stood together in the empty hallway, taking it all in. "We did it," Sophia said, her voice filled with emotion. "We actually did it." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Yeah, but this is just the beginning." As they walked out of the school for the final time, they knew that their journey was far from over. The world was full of challenges, but they were ready to face them, together. The months following Emma and Sophia's graduation marked a period of reflection for the school and the community. While the mentorship program continued to thrive, Emma and Sophia's absence left a noticeable void. Their determination and leadership had inspired countless students, but with them gone, questions arose about whether the momentum they had built could be sustained. Lily, the once shy first-year student who had blossomed under their guidance, found herself stepping into a new role as a leader within the feminist club. Though she was nervous at first, she channeled the lessons Emma and Sophia had taught her, embracing her newfound confidence. "I'm not Emma or Sophia," she admitted during her first meeting as president of the club. "But they taught me that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up and trying your best. And that's what I'm going to do." The other members nodded in support, and Lily felt a surge of determination. She wasn't alone in this. Together, they could carry on the legacy Emma and Sophia had left behind. Meanwhile, the mentorship program continued to expand. Principal Williams had secured additional funding from local organizations, allowing the program to hire part-time coordinators and develop new resources for students and teachers. The success of the program attracted attention from neighboring schools, many of which sought guidance on implementing similar initiatives. Mr. Harris, who had initially been reluctant to get involved, found himself increasingly invested in the program. Working with the students had forced him to confront his own biases in ways he hadn't anticipated. He began attending workshops and seminars on equity and inclusion, eager to learn more about how he could be a better educator. One afternoon, as he was preparing lesson plans in his classroom, Lily knocked on the door. Mr. Harris looked up, surprised to see her. "Lily," he said, "what can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you," she said, stepping inside, "for everything you've done for the mentorship program. I know it hasn't been easy, but it means a lot." Mr. Harris leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted, "but it's been worth it. You all have taught me more than I ever expected." Lily smiled, encouraged by his words. "Well, I think Emma and Sophia would be proud of you." Mr. Harris's lips quirked into a small smile. "I hope so." Emma and Sophia, now college freshmen, found themselves adjusting to life beyond high school. They had chosen different universities but kept in touch regularly, exchanging updates about their classes and their efforts to bring the values of the mentorship program to their new campuses. For Emma, the transition was both exciting and daunting. She joined a student organization focused on social justice and quickly became involved in planning events and campaigns. Her experiences in high school had given her the confidence to take on leadership roles, but she still grappled with moments of doubt. One evening, as she sat in her dorm room reviewing notes for an upcoming meeting, she received a call from Sophia. "How's it going?" Sophia asked, her voice warm and familiar. Emma sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's a lot. I'm trying to make an impact, but it feels like I'm starting from scratch. Nobody knows me here, and I'm not sure if they take me seriously." "You felt that way when we started the mentorship program too," Sophia reminded her. "And look at what we accomplished. You got this, Emma. Just keep showing up." Emma smiled, her spirits lifted. "Thanks, Sophia. How about you? How's everything on your end?" "Pretty good," Sophia said. "I'm working with this amazing professor who's all about equity in education. She's been helping me figure out how to turn our high school program into something bigger, maybe even a nonprofit." Emma's eyes widened. "That's incredible. You have to keep me updated." "Of course," Sophia said. "We're in this together, remember?" Always, Emma said, her confidence renewed. Back at their old high school, the mentorship program faced its first major challenge without Emma and Sophia at the helm. A group of students began spreading rumors that the program was unnecessary, claiming that it gave unfair advantages to certain groups of students. Their complaints reached the school board, sparking a heated debate about the program's future. Lily, now the face of the mentorship program, found herself thrust into the spotlight. Though she was nervous, she knew she couldn't back down. With the support of Principal Williams and the other mentors, she prepared to defend the program at the next school board meeting. On the night of the meeting, the auditorium was packed with students, parents, and teachers. The tension was palpable as the board members called Lily to the podium. She took a deep breath, clutching her prepared remarks. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "My name is Lily, and I'm here to talk about why the mentorship program matters." She went on to share her own story, describing how the program had helped her find her voice and develop the confidence to lead. She also presented data showing the program's positive impact on student engagement, academic performance, and overall school culture. "This program isn't about giving anyone an unfair advantage," she concluded. "It's about leveling the playing field and giving every student the tools they need to succeed. Isn't that what education is supposed to be about?" The audience erupted into applause, and even some of the board members nodded in approval. By the end of the meeting, the board voted unanimously to continue funding the program. Lily stepped off the podium, her heart pounding with relief. As she returned to her seat, Principal Williams gave her a proud nod. "Well done," he said. Emma and Sophia would be proud. As the months went on, the mentorship program became a model for other schools across the district. Lily and her fellow mentors were invited to speak at conferences and workshops, sharing their experiences and helping other students start similar programs in their own schools. Emma and Sophia kept tabs on the program's progress from afar, cheering on Lily and the others from the sidelines. Though they were no longer directly involved, they felt a deep sense of pride in what they had started. One day, Emma received an email from Lily with a photo attached. It showed a group of students standing in front of a banner that read Mentorship Program Expansion, 10 schools and counting. Emma stared at the photo, her heart swelling with emotion. She forwarded it to Sophia with a simple message: "Look at what we've done." Sophia replied almost immediately, "This is just the beginning." As graduation approached for Lily and the other seniors, the school held a special ceremony to honor the mentorship program and its impact on the community. Principal Williams gave a heartfelt speech, praising the students who had worked tirelessly to make the program a success. "This program is proof that when we listen to our students and empower them to lead, incredible things can happen," he said. "Emma and Sophia may have started this journey, but it's all of you who have carried it forward. And I have no doubt that you'll continue to do so, wherever life takes you." Lily, standing among her fellow mentors, felt a surge of pride and gratitude. The program had changed her life, and she was determined to pay it forward. As the ceremony ended, she looked out at the crowd and saw her parents beaming with pride. She also noticed Mr. Harris standing off to the side, clapping quietly but sincerely. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small nod. Lily smiled, knowing that his journey had been as transformative as her own. The mentorship program became a permanent fixture at the school, a testament to what could be achieved when students and educators work together. For Emma and Sophia, it was a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could spark lasting change. As they continued their respective journeys, they carried with them the lessons they had learned and the knowledge that they had made a difference, not just in their school, but in the lives of countless others. And that, they knew, was only the beginning.